What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, January 22nd, 2018, start of a brand new week, getting on toward the end of the month here. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. It's been a very busy news day. It's been a very busy news weekend. So we're going to get right into it. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, quick little technical note, BAM user went away over the weekend. They've changed their business model. They used to provide streaming services for websites like mine, and they have basically changed their model where they're specializing now in corporate communication, where corporations are streaming video for teleconferencing. And so over the weekend, I went through this whole process of setting up YouTube streaming, which involved a completely different encoder, setting up a separate channel on my YouTube account, and all of that, and could not get the video player that was embedded in the website to work. And it took me a long time to finally track down that YouTube recently changed its policy so that only accounts that are being monetized are allowed to embed the video player. And of course, YouTube does not allow whatreallyhappened.com to be monetized. So unfortunately, instead of having the player right there on the main screen or right there in the chat room, you have to click a link that takes you to the streaming page at YouTube itself. Frankly, this whole video streaming thing has become a lot more trouble than it's worth. And, I'd like people to maybe write on in as to whether they think I should keep the video going or not, because, it's just my face day after day after day. You all know what I look like, and if you don't, go down to the post office and check out the wanted posters. So getting on into the news here, obviously Friday the government shut down. The bad news is they restarted it this morning. They were able to get enough votes to get past the Democratic filibuster. And so they've reached a budget deal, but it's only a 3-week spending bill that will fund the government until February 8th. And what's going on in the backstory is the Democrats are literally trying to hold the government hostage to get their amnesty for illegal immigrants rammed through the Congress. That's basically what they're doing. And so they've basically said, okay, 3 weeks of budget, we're going to talk about it. We're going to see if Congress keeps its promise about amnesty for the Dreamers and so forth. This is absurd. This is going to backfire on the Democrats horribly, and I know they're counting on the illegal immigrants to help win certain elections across the country, but everybody's going to remember the Democrats shut down the government over the illegal immigrant issue. And that means to the Democrats, the illegal immigrants are more important than the legal citizens. To the Democrats, the illegal immigrants were more important than our military personnel, who were going to have to go without pay. To the Democrats, the illegal immigrants were more important than all those federal government workers who were going to have to go without pay. And when we get closer to the November election and when we get into 2020, we need to remind everybody that's what was going on. That they were out there willing to basically abandon the entire country, hold it to hostage so they can have more illegal immigrants come on in and vote Democratic here. So apparently Chuck Schumer's actually admitted on tape back in 2013 how the Democrats had a strategy to take the government hostage with a shutdown unless the Democrats get their way with the immigration issue. So this has been going on for a very, very long time. The Democrats are literally taking this country, which was built by generation after generation of the American people, and they're bartering that which they do not own to the illegal immigrants in exchange for more votes. Elections don't get more dishonest than that. Now, on the subject of immigration, and they're out there saying, oh, if you're against the illegal immigrants, you're being racist. No, we're not. Illegal is not a race. But it's time to turn some of the Democrats, liberals' logic back on top of themselves. In that whole gun debate, the Democrats are constantly saying that if banning all guns saves just one life, it is worth it. Okay, well, if banning all illegal immigrants saves just one life, That's worth it. So we need to use their own logic against them. Not that liberals have a close association with logical thinking, but it's something that we can do here. But basically, the Democrats chose the illegal aliens over the rest of us by forcing the government shutdown. Even CNN is saying this is a huge gamble for the Democrats. The voters might not forget what the Democrats just did. And if I have anything to say about it come November and 2020, they're not going to forget about it. Rob Reiner, actor, not a politician, not known for intellectual accomplishment, basically yesterday said that the government shutdown is actually part of a race war over what he calls the browning of America. And he says it's all about racism. The GOP is frightened to death of the browning of America. And he goes on to basically describe this as a new civil war. It's amazing. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. China has observed that this latest shutdown shows that the U.S. government is in chaos. It's chronically flawed. They're absolutely right. The government has become so corrupt and so politicized. They're not taking care of the nation. The Democrats just proved that. They were willing to let the nation just slide off the rails to get their way on immigration. And what they're probably going to be thinking now is that if legal American citizens are going to turn away from the Democrats have this debacle, well, we'd better just get that many more of those illegal immigrants in here to make sure that we win the next election. By the way, there was a report over the weekend from the Immigration Customs enforcement people saying that they have observed that as illegal immigrants are just pouring across the border, somebody is arranging for them to get on planes and be flown throughout the United States. Same thing they were doing with the refugees. They're just saying these chartered flights and no identification, nobody knows who they are. I'm willing to bet these illegal immigrants are being flown to voting districts that currently have a slight GOP majority of voters in order to flip them the other way. I think that's what they're going. Now, let's get on to the FISA memo. People are just going back and forth. They're fighting about this. 65 Republican lawmakers are calling for the immediate release of the FISA memo. Apparently, whatever's in there is so shocking. The memo itself is currently locked in a room under guard to make sure that nothing happens to it, although I'm sure there's still another copy of it over there in the Congressional Committee. Now, Democratic Representative Adam Schiff is saying the FISA memo should stay secret because Americans won't understand it. In other words, Democratic Representative Adam Schiff thinks you're all morons. He thinks you're idiots. He thinks you are too stupid to read this memo and decide for yourself what it actually means. And he's out there denouncing the Twitter campaign, released the memo saying it's not ordinary Americans. Ordinary Americans don't care. It's all those Russian bots. It's those Russian Twitter bots. They're the only ones pushing for the memo to be released. They are getting desperate. One of the problems, though, is that there are several Republicans, rhinos, Republican in name only, who are trying to help the Democrats keep this memo locked away from you, the American people. So Republican Peter King is now out there saying this memo should not be released due to concerns over national security. Actually, I think it's his own security that he's worried about when Americans find out just how rogue the entire machinery of the federal government went during the Obama administration and possibly before that Bush. So that's what they're really scared about right now. Now, an ex-Secret Service agent is out there saying that his name is Dan Bongino, and he's saying that this FISA memo is so damning that Obama will have just two options. One is to claim he didn't know anything at all about what was going on. Remember how when the Tea Party scandal first came out, he got up there and said, I only heard about it on TV, and nobody bought that one. And of course, the other option is that he's going to go to jail. A lot of people are going to go to jail. This could be the beginning of the end of a lot of careers of very, very corrupt people. And more information is coming on out. Apparently, a lot of it is now focusing on this Peter Strzok's text messages. And apparently one of them now suggests that Loretta Lynch knew Comey was going to exonerate Hillary long before the investigation was really underway. It was just decided ahead of time between Lynch and Comey. Yeah, we can't do anything to Hillary Clinton. She knows where all the bodies are buried. She'll bring down the entire government unless we leave her alone. So, yeah, it was just, again, the government protecting itself. And apparently, they knew all about this before the 3-hour interview with Clinton, which, by the way, was in her home and not under oath. One of the quotes that really angers me coming from Peter Strzok and reveals the thinking inside the deep state is he actually tested Lisa Page saying, we can't let the American people pick the next president. We need a backup plan. He called it an insurance policy. Yeah, actually, you're supposed to let the American people pick the president. That's the way it's supposed to work. So what they were trying to do was a coup d'etat, usurpation of our political process. Story coming out of Blacklisted News. Apparently a former federal prosecutor sat down with the Daily Caller and gave an interview. And this is Joe DiGenova, former special counsel, who went after both the Teamsters and former New York Governor Spitzer. And he's out there saying that there was this brazen plot to exonerate Hillary Clinton for all the real crimes she's done and to frame Donald Trump for this bogus Russian collusion story. And it's unraveling. It's starting to unravel. I would like to see that happen. We're in a very, very dangerous time right now. We could start seeing a lot of wet work. Now, Paul Craig Roberts is out there basically providing the overview, saying that this FISA memo, it involves the NSA, the FBI, the Department of Justice, the FISA court itself, basically all of these agencies and all the people at the top of these agencies committing treason at the highest level. And he says right now the NSA is actually being used to try and dig up dirt on members of the House and Senate in order to coerce their conformity in terms of not going after the crimes of the security agencies. And apparently this blackmail mechanism was put into gear the minute the news reported that the House Intelligence Committee had assembled proof that the FBI, DOJ, and DNC created Russiagate as a conspiracy to unseat President Trump. Now, I doubt that last one. I imagine the NSA has been digging dirt on members of our political system, corporate leaders, for a lot longer than that. When J. Edgar Hoover was head of the FBI, he was known for his special private files because he was always having FBI agents digging up blackmail information. He even blackmailed John F. Kennedy at one point. And when Hoover died or was assassinated, those files disappeared. Nobody knows who got them. Now, apparently the FBI has come on out and said that it has lost 5 months of the text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, which were under subpoena, and golly, they were just here a minute ago. Yeah, it's a big place over here at the FBI. They just got lost. The only problem is the FBI is lying because last August, the Department of Justice's Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, reported receiving the texts in question. A lot of forgetful people over there at the FBI. And these lost FBI texts could form the basis for a motion to dismiss against the Russia probe. along with what's in the FISA memo. So they just lost it. They just lost it. Remember back when the Obama State Department claimed that a glitch was responsible for deleting several minutes of incriminating evidence from a press briefing where an Obama administration spokesman admitted to a Fox News reporter that the administration was lying about the Iran deal. Ooh, there was a glitch. You know, nothing serious here. It just happens all the time here. Well, the glitch has struck again because the National Security Agency has destroyed surveillance data it pledged to preserve in connection with pending lawsuits. So everybody's losing the stuff. Everybody's losing stuff. Okay. Apparently, some of the material lost by the FBI, misplaced by the FBI, was related to that meeting on the tarmac between Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch. And of course, not a word about this on the corporate media. The corporate media is all about to shut down. They're apparently doing the final vote to end the shutdown. And nothing about the war zones. We were noticing that over the weekend. You have to look at that little tiny crawl at the bottom with a magnifying glass to find out that Turkey's invaded Syria and is fighting U.S.-backed forces. The media is also continuing to downplay, if not outright bury, the indictments in the Clinton-Obama Uranium One Russia deal. Now there was real collusion, provable collusion. And we're seeing the entire deep state circle the wagons around Hillary Clinton, not because they love her, but because if all of these scandals come on out, it's going to unravel all the way back to Arkansas in the 1980s and the gun running and the drug running and all of that corruption. And I can't imagine the American people sitting still for that once they're forced to confront that reality. Now, speaking of Arkansas in the 1980s, back in 1985, there was a housekeeper in the governor's mansion, Marcia Ann Bosley, and she was let go from the staff for undisclosed reasons, and just went away. She had no family, and people figured she just moved someplace else and started her life over again. Unfortunately, no. They have found a body in Arkansas wrapped in plastic in a shallow grave, and DNA has identified it as Marcia Ann Bosley and her unborn child. So, another candidate for the dead bodies list. Two more up in Canada, Barry and Honey Sherman. Now, they were found last month hanging side by side, and it was immediately announced, murder-suicide. No reason. They're billionaires. They're very rich. But yeah, it had to be a murder-suicide. Well, apparently, the Sherman family hired their own team of investigators who found a lot of evidence, and now the Canadian officials are acknowledging that Barry and Honey Sherman were murdered in their home by multiple perpetrators. There was just a whole bunch of evidence that was missed in the original rush to judgment. Now, here's where it gets interesting. This billionaire, Barry Sherman, got rich with a pharmaceutical company that was selling medications to the Bill, Hillary, and whatever her name is, Clinton Foundation. Now remember, the Clinton Foundation got rocked with their AIDS project. When it came on out, the AIDS drugs that were supposedly being sent out to the third world in exchange for all these donations were seriously watered down to the point of complete ineffectiveness. So what did Barry know that was such a threat? We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. To put the volume up, that'll make it work a lot better. Welcome back to our show here. If you would like to support Republic Broadcasting, keep us on the air. The postal address to send a check or a money order is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you would like to call on in and pledge to be a recurring subscriber, that number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. Now, getting on back to the issue of Haiti, which there now appears to be a Clinton Foundation, and yes, I remember her name is Chelsea. Stop sending me emails. There's been a lot of talk about just how badly the Clinton Foundation basically screwed Haiti. They collected a huge amount of money for Haitian relief, and very little of it actually got down to the ground level in Haiti. A lot of it was spent building luxury resorts that were then sold off. Apparently, there was one big scandal where there was a building contractor who supposedly was going to build a whole bunch of new houses, didn't build them. It was just corruption from top to bottom. And so now the corporate media is out there trying to say, there's no big deal about Haiti. Look, they're all fine down there. Conan O'Brien went down to Haiti and he stayed at one of the fancy resorts over the weekend to prove that President Trump is wrong over his alleged blank hole comments. And he's out there saying Haiti is truly a beautiful country. And he tweeted with a picture of himself sipping from a coconut while wading in the ocean. Now, yes, when you're at a luxury resort, it looks really good. But that's not the whole country. You can't judge the whole country by it. I learned that firsthand. Many years ago during my first marriage, I took my then wife down to this resort called Resides in Mexico. And they picked us up in a bus at the airport and they drove us through Guadalajara. And boy, that really qualifies as a blank hole. And then of course we got to the resort and it was absolutely gorgeous. You can see it in Google Earth. For those of you old enough to remember the movie 10 with Bo Derek, that's the beach resort. That's Resides. So Conan O'Brien definitely, I mean, he's at a luxury resort. He's on the beach sipping from a coconut and he says, yeah, Haiti's beautiful here. Now, Anderson Cooper took a different approach saying that Haiti is rich because of its culture and its history. So they're really out there just pushing this idea that nothing bad has happened to Haiti outside of the hurricane itself. All right, let's look at the war zones. There's a lot going on, and of course the world's attention right now is focused on Afrin in Syria. Turkey has pushed across the border in a lot of places, but the focus is on Afrin. Over 150 Kurdish positions have been destroyed, and the Turkey-backed militias capture their first region. They've already started removing the Kurds from some of the land they've been occupying. And apparently there's a tough battle underway in the village of Shinkal in the Raju region in Afrin. Adding, the Kurdish fighters have thus far targeted and destroyed 2 Turkish tanks in the village of Sharan near Afrin. Gee, I wonder where the Kurds are getting anti-tank weapons. That sounds very interesting. Now, last week when somebody was asking me, what is Russia going to do? And I said, I expect that Russia will basically back off and let this be between Turkey and Syria in order to avoid a potential confrontation with the United States and an escalation. And that's basically what they've done. The Russian Ministry of Defense has ordered all Russian military out of Afrin, Syria. They're just going to sit back and let the Syrian forces deal with this. Now, there's another report saying that the Kurds have destroyed 5 Turkish tanks. They may be fibbing. Truth is the first casualty of any war anyway. And again, that issue, where are they getting the weapons? Well, the U.S. is still supplying arms to Kurds. They said they were going to stop. They haven't stopped, and that's why the Turkish jets hit Manak Air Base, which is being used by the United States to bring in weapons to give to the Kurds. And I can imagine that Turkey is not happy about U.S. support for the Kurds. I can imagine that Syria is not very happy about what's going on with U.S. support for the Kurds. In fact, Russia's come on out and said that it is the U.S. unilateral actions in Syria that provoked Turkey to take direct action. And yes, the U.S. has been mucking about in other people's countries for 16 years, and they're getting tired of it. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Do join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and getting on back to the situation between Turkey and Syria. Turkey's ex-foreign minister, Yasir Yakis, in an interview with Russia Today, said basically what has caused this crisis is that the United States did break their promise to stop arming the Kurds. And Washington basically announced they were going to cut off supplies and support to Kurdish militias. They didn't. And that's what's triggered this crisis. Along with, of course, another reminder to the world that you cannot trust anything the United States government says. Now, apparently, along with anti-tank weapons, the United States is supplying at least short-range missiles to the Kurds, because some of these missiles have hit Turkish towns near the Syrian border. Casualties are reported. The town of Rouhani's been hit with multiple missiles fired from northern Syria. At least one person was killed, 32 others wounded. So this is getting really, really serious. Now, a lot of other countries around the world are saying, let's cool this down. Iran has asked Turkey to just pull back. Egypt is saying they don't agree with what's going on over there. But Erdogan is out there saying Turkey will not take a step back in the Afrin operation. So the next question is going to be, what is Syria going to do? We know Russia's stepping back. What is Syria going to do? They've made a lot of talk about opposing the Turkish forces coming on in. But again, Syria would like the Kurdish problem solved. And they may just kind of hang on back. Assad may just figure that once the Kurds are dealt with, Erdogan will return to his side of the border with Turkey, and there won't be any need to do anything. I'm sure Assad is reluctant to actually go to war with Turkey. Now, technically, because the United States is backing those Kurds, we have two NATO member countries fighting against each other in Syria. And that's a very chaotic situation. Now, apparently today, the United Nations Security Council is taking up the discussion about what's going on in Syria, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of a resolution they come up with, and more interesting to see who decides they're going to veto it. Apparently, France requested this emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. Now, turning over to Ukraine. Interesting story from Russia Insider, the coming big war in Ukraine. And basically they go on to say that the United States really has been humiliated in Syria by the nearly complete military victory of Assad forces with substantial Russian air assistance. And the concern now is that the United States is looking to start something in Ukraine as a form of vengeance on Russia. And that may be closer to reality than you might think, because apparently Ukraine is making moves to pull out of the Minsk Accords. And right now, because everybody's looking at Syria, nobody's really keeping a watch on Ukraine, and they should be. They should be. Now, here's an interesting story about what is called blowback, or what goes around comes around. Because now over in Iran, one of their military officials is now asking the international community to support protest rallies inside the United States. This is a payback for the recent riots in Iran, which were found to be backed by outside governments, at least one of which was the United States, and they arrested a bunch of people. So Iran is thinking maybe it's time for the U.S. government to learn what that feels like. when other countries are sending in money and support and supplies to cause political unrest. Not that we don't have enough of our own. And by the way, do you remember back in 1981 was right after the Iranian Revolution that kicked out the U.S. puppet ruler, the Shah. And the United States made a promise. This is a direct quote. The United States pledges that it is, and from now on, will be the policy of the United States not to intervene directly or indirectly, politically or militarily in Iran's internal affairs. Yet another whopper of a lie from the swamp. We're going to take a phone call now from Steve Elkins. Steve, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind? Steve, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Hello? Yeah.
Yes, you're on the air.
You were mentioning the U.S.'s word meaning nothing, holding no credibility, and standing by your word. And it brought up that the conversation, the article actually on RBN about Trump holding aid to Palestine, and I wanted to get your comment on that.
Well, this is Donald Trump basically punishing Palestine for being unhappy with his declaration of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And apparently Mike Pence is over in Israel right now, and he's seeing firsthand how angry some of the people are over there. I think it was a dumb thing to do because that money allowed the United States to exert some control over the Palestinian government. And now the Palestinian government is saying, keep your money, we're just going to go our own way now. So that situation is edging closer to chaos.
Yeah, it really is. And, on RBN website, you probably saw that video that somebody had a GoPro camera on their bike and they rode through a homeless camp, miles and miles of homelessness in Anaheim, California. And I started thinking,
Yes.
I saw those pictures, that video, and I started thinking about the Palestinian people who've been living like this for a lot longer than these people in Anaheim, and it really breaks my heart. And then I saw that article where Trump had reneged on the offer of how much millions of dollars that would have gone to Palestine to help these people who are living just like this, these tent cities in Anaheim, just like this.
Yes, it's very, very ugly. And homelessness in general is ugly. There's also a video on YouTube where somebody put a GoPro on a bicycle and they did the bike path that goes around Pearl Harbor, all 3 locks. And there's a huge homeless population down there. Same thing. Tent after box shanty after tent. And it's terrible the Palestinians are having to live like that. It's also terrible that Americans are having to live like that. And we're going to be talking a bit more about that when we get to the economic part of the show.
Okay. Hey, thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Okay. Now, a little bit of good news out of Germany. The German government declared last Friday it will immediately stop approving arms exports to anyone participating in the war in Yemen, including Saudi Arabia. And that's a big deal because Saudi Arabia is a major buyer of German weapons. So Germany's actually showing some spine on that a little bit. Meanwhile, probably you haven't even heard this yet, apparently there are border clashes between India and Pakistan now. Tensions are increasing. Both sides are accusing each other of border violations, and apparently nearly a dozen civilians have been killed since the first of the year. So that is also ramping up. And the danger there, of course, is that both India and Pakistan have nuclear missiles. So getting on down to Israel, Mike Pence is there, and he was giving a speech before the Israeli parliament, and he was interrupted when Arab lawmakers stood up holding signs that read, "Jerusalem is the capital of Palestine." And this resulted literally in a fight among the members of Knesset, and these Arab politicians were removed from the building. But things are not going smoothly over there in Israel for Mike Pence. And it's getting even more interesting because Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas was at a meeting in Brussels, and the European Union's foreign policy chief is assuring him the European Union backs a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem. And see, there's the dichotomy. Palestine is willing to share the city with Israel. Israel doesn't want that. They want it all. They want Palestine to just dry up and blow away. Okay, so let's talk about the economic news and California. Liberal haven. Absolutely, the liberal nirvana, if you will. California's poverty rate has now topped 20%, nearly twice the national average. And by the way, if you look at standard of living and poverty rates all across America, you will find that wherever liberals are in control, conditions are much worse. There may be a few exceptions, but as a general rule, it does tend to fit. Okay. 87% of all the wealth created last year went to the top 1%. 82% of the wealth went to the top 1%. It's a combination of trying to do everything by interest-bearing debt, along with these completely outrageous executive salaries and bonuses. But the wealth inequality has reached a crisis point in this country. You can't have all the money piled up at the top. The economy can't survive that. The economy requires a solid, prosperous middle class who are able to trade their labor and skills for decent wages and salaries so they can go down to the shopping malls and buy the products these corporations are selling. And we don't have that anymore. The middle class is evaporating. All the stores are talking about going to robot cashiers and robot clerks, just throwing people out of work. The economy cannot survive this path. And yet nobody seems to have the courage to stand up and say, we're on a bad path. We're on a path to eventual economic collapse. There's no way you can sustain this going this direction. Alrighty, now then, over in Europe, things are really heating up regarding the European Union. And apparently over in Italy, their population is shifting toward populism and nationalism. And of course, that's going to be a major headache for the European Union, which is still trying to glue everything back together, still trying to find a way to undo the Brexit. Trying to talk some of these other countries. I mean, so many of the EU countries are talking about referendums to redefine the border situation, if not to outright leave. And the globalists and the liberals are still out there with utter nonsense. Now, over in Germany, there's a socialist minister, Nicole Hochs, and responding to the crisis of rapes that are going on in Germany right now, she had a wonderful solution. Let's just bring in more migrants. There aren't enough female migrants. We need to bring in more female migrants, and then that will make the rape crisis go away. Somehow, I rather doubt it. Now, up in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam, there was a protest on Saturday, basically demanding a halt to immigration. At this point, it's very obvious. The ordinary people of Europe want this to stop. And the politicians, for whatever reason, they're being bribed, they support the New World Order, they're on Soros' payroll. For whatever reason, they're still forcing through this open borders policy. Look how hard the Democrats are trying to keep the borders open in this country. They literally shut down the government of the United States of America over this issue. I think the globalists are afraid the wheels are coming off of the New World Order, both because of the economic predations and because of the backlash from immigration. And so their solution is to just push as hard as they can, keep pushing as hard as they can until they accomplish what they think they want to accomplish. But people are pushing back, and they ought to. There's nothing wrong with being proud of your nation and wanting the best for your nation. It's just a larger version of loving your family and taking care of your family before you take care of anybody else. That's just common sense. Now, apparently up in Sweden, the migrant crime situation has gotten out of hand. They're dealing with a lot of gang violence, and apparently it's triggered a rush of vigilante squads who are now basically roaming the streets with rifles. And let's see. Okay. Let's see. We've got a caller waiting on the line. Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you both. Snack bar and everything.
Thank you.
And a continuous speedy recovery as well. As far as Shumi Boy is concerned, up in the District of Criminals is concerned, unless he proclaims himself as God in the District of Criminals, thus declaring that he can decide what people should or should not see or hear, he needs to come out with the memo and what it's about and so forth. Because if it's that explosive, guess what? The cat's already out the bag. You might as well go ahead and come clean with it.
Well, we suspect what's in there, and this memo makes it official, an official conclusion of the U.S. government. One thing you need to be aware of, somebody has already put on out what purports to be a leaked copy of the memo, but it's completely bogus. They're already out there trying to muddy up the waters and keep everything confused.
Well, I'll give you that. I mean, I'm coming across different notation about, this memo was released about this or about that, and I'm thinking, for Pete's sake, come on, people. Stop wasting electrons doing that garbage. So if they really want to present themselves as being honorable by the people and working for the people, then get their act together. The people are not stupid. I mean, a lot of people may be have allowed themselves to become mentally challenged or conditioned, but a majority of people are a lot clear-headed than that and can handle the truth of what's going on. So let it be known whatever's going on, and let the dice roll like they are.
I absolutely agree. And I got to take another commercial break here. Francis, stay on the line. I'm going to come back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I've just found out apparently the links I have to go to the YouTube streaming page for my show is incorrect. Unless you're logged in as me, so I got to find the new address and get that in there. I only got 2 complaining emails, so it doesn't look like anybody's really watching the streaming video. I think I may just take that out. You all know what I look like. Getting on back to Francis in North Carolina, you need to understand what's going on. With the election of Donald Trump, okay, the deep state lost their complete control over the country. Up until Trump, the deep state was calling all the shots. They were picking all the politicians and the candidates. They had complete control over what was going on, and they could get away with doing whatever they felt like getting away with. Spying on the American people, ignoring the Constitution, wet work, and the rest of it. But with Donald Trump's victory, they went into a panic. They still have a lot of control, but it's not complete and not total. And that's why they're just on this rampage trying to get Donald Trump out of the White House and get somebody in there who can be relied upon to go along with continuing the cover-ups of the deep state. That's why this FISA memo has become such a firebrand. And the deep state's going to be doing absolutely everything that they can to either block it from the American people or, failing that, to somehow undermine its credibility. And like I said, already there's a bogus document circulating that claims to be the leaked memo. But if you read the way it's written, it's very clearly not an official government document.
Well, true. Whether you call it a firebrand or a hot potato, they just don't want to handle, for that matter, and thus they got locked away, for that matter. My observation is this. It's apparent that, of course, a lot of people are going to think that, well, I'm disparaging on millennials. If that's the case, then fine, so be it. I take no offense to that. Apparently a lot of young folks that are millennials or whatever that are so tied up with their electronic toys ad nauseum and whatever have you, they're going to be unconcerned about this in general. If it doesn't help them in any way, they're not going to worry about it. However, my question would be is this: who authored the memo to start with? Who wrote it? Who wrote it to begin with? Who submitted it to begin with? That this has created such a firestorm that they want to keep it under lock and key or high-end security or whatever you want to call it.
Well, apparently this 4-page memo represents the conclusions of a Department of Justice investigation. So it probably had multiple authors, that put in all the notes and they assembled it, then it was reformatted and sent on over to Congress under classification. Because the contents apparently were deemed something that needed to be under control. But you have all these members of Congress who are out there saying, no, the American people have every right to see this. And, of course, the Democrats are out there saying this is just another attempt to undermine the Russia investigation.
Well, they can say all they want to, but the point is that depending on what those individuals in the DOJ had done to pull all this information together, if they are looking for it to be a redeeming quality on their behalf, I'll hang.
All right, we'll keep you across the station identification, and also we have another caller waiting when we come back with hour number 2. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're still talking with Francis in North Carolina. You had something else you wanted to add.
Yeah, just a final thought for you. For the said parties that had came up with that memo to the DOJ, if they think that basically submitting this late in the game, as it were, not to make a bad pun out of it, is going to exonerate them, they're dead wrong. It's not going to exonerate them. The question is, why did they take so long to submit it to start with unless they were under threat of death?
Well, no, it's not delayed. This is the investigation into the investigation. And that's fairly recent. So it's a reasonable amount of time has elapsed, and they've come on out and said, yeah, all this stuff is going on. And we don't know the exact details, and there's a big fight going on over whether we, the American people, have the right to know what our government is doing. Or what the government is doing. It's not our government anymore.
They need to clear the air. Have a great one.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to switch over to James in South Carolina. Aloha, James. Thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Michael. You talk about people losing their jobs because of automation, computers, and all.
Yes.
I wonder about that. If you have automation, it could make productivity so much greater that people could work 20-hour weeks. I mean, I don't think that's foolishness. I mean, it has happened before. People at one time worked more than the average 40-hour week. Now they work 40 or whatever. And it seems to me that
these days the 40-hour work week has gone away. A lot of companies, you're having to work 50 hours. That's actually become the normal in the computer animation industry. So the problem is that they're going to automated systems that do not require human interaction. So there isn't a need for any humans to be around other than the repair technicians.
Well, doesn't that mean that the productivity goes up, though?
Yeah, but if you don't have anybody to buy what's being produced, the economy breaks down.
Well, my understanding is, I keep hearing it and I believe it, that there are hidden technologies. There are technologies that are being hidden. They're not being given to the public. Well, if these technologies were given to the public, it seems to me that people might be able to use these technologies to create their own lives easier. I mean, if you need a widget, you can create your own widget with a 3D printer, it seems to me. You don't have to go buy a widget, but you still have the benefit of the widget because you create it. It might be the same thing with food production or things like that. I mean, I don't know this. But,
I mean, if the American population were uniformly spread across the farmable land in the United States, we'd all have a comfortable life. We'd have a little house. We'd have a garden growing enough food to feed us during the year. But the corporate mentality is to herd everybody into the cities where they are dependent on the corporate food supply chain. And again, where that breaks down, if there are no jobs for these people because they've been replaced by robots, then they can't afford to buy the food. And that's why I'm saying we're on this very dangerous direction. There needs to be an effort to preserve employment for people. I mean, look how many Americans are already out of work. Almost 100 million. For various reasons, job offshoring, the economic decline in general, and now they're going to make the situation worse with all these robots.
Well, to me, it looks like if you have nefarious people in charge, which it seems like we do, then what you say is a greater problem than if you do not have nefarious people in charge. If you give people freedom to indulge... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, they're not necessarily nefarious. They're just being greedy in the immediate moment. They're doing whatever it is that increases the flow of wealth to them that minute. And they're not thinking long term, and that is where the problem lies.
Well, if you abolish the special privilege that these people and the government have, and you unleash the hidden technologies, then it would seem to me that would go a long way toward freeing up people so they could do these things. I mean, any increase in technology does cause, people being change things. I'm not going to argue the point. Some people will be hurt, some people will be helped. But if everybody had equal opportunity, it seems like to me things would be better. I mean, more people were employed, in agriculture? I mean, 1900, I think it was 90% of the people were employed in agriculture, and I'm sure that when everything else started coming on, everybody said, well, these people won't have a job. Well, they did. And I think there will be jobs that are unheard of now. If you allow freedom of the technology and freedom of the people. I don't think we have either now.
I have to disagree with you because, again, if you go to Google Earth, and it's like that caller last week was saying, you go down and you look at Chile, you'll see all, hundreds and hundreds of private family-owned farms. And here in the United States, all the farming land is now under the control of corporations who use a lot of automation. And so the reality is far fewer people are involved in agriculture work than used to be the case. They don't even use illegal immigrants to pick the crops anymore. The crops are picked by mechanical devices. So again, you have massive unemployment leading to a situation where no matter how productive the automation makes your company, you won't have any customers.
Well, it's my understanding that 28% of the land is owned by the federal government. Is that not the case?
That's true, but that's mostly out in the western desert. Again, that land being owned by the government is a violation of the enclave clause of the Constitution.
Well, I'm not saying that your position is untenable or anything, but I'm saying there is a contending position. And that's all. I mean, I enjoy your show, and I will continue to listen whether I agree with you or not.
All right. Well, thank you very much there.
Okay.
See, here's the situation. Here's the situation. We can all imagine an alternative society, all we want, but we need to solve the problems with a minimum impact on the existing society as it is. We're not in a position to just tear everything down and start all over again. And working within our existing system, what is needed is for more of that wealth captured at the top of the economy to be directed down to the bottom as decent wages and salaries so it can be poured back into the economic system and keep it going. Now, in a proper capitalist society, there's a recycling mechanism, and that is called, taxes on the wealthy, to be brought back down and spent as wages and salaries for working class Americans, or to have a more reasonable approach to pay scales. Now, American pay scales are just wildly out of kilter with the rest of the world. Over in Japan, for example, for the most part, the boss of a company is only making maybe 2 or 3 times what the ordinary worker is. And you contrast that with corporate pay in this country, and you'll realize how it has just gone completely out of skew. All All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. The phone lines are now open, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to Europe and immigration and all the problems being caused there. Apparently, actually, this first story is from Minnesota, right here in the United States. And it involves a former student at St. Catherine University on the St. Paul campus who has been arrested for arson. This Muslim woman is out there setting fires all over this campus, and she said she did it because she'd been reading about the U.S. military destroying schools in Iraq or Afghanistan, and she felt that she should do the same thing so that Americans know how that feels. And then she ended up by saying, you guys are lucky I don't know how to build a bomb because I would have done that. Now, this next story ought to get you very angry. We already know the Democrats have admitted their strategy for the November election in 2020 is to basically bring in all these illegal immigrants, get them into voting districts with a slim GOP majority in order to flip that district from GOP to Democrat. And right now, according to this story that came on out from WorldNet Daily, California is going to register all illegal aliens to vote automatically, starting April 1. That they're going to be handing out driver's licenses and they're going to register these illegals to vote. Here's the problem. Non-citizens are not allowed to vote. The state of California is engaging in election fraud. We need to see some of these state officials in handcuffs, both for the election fraud and the Title VIII violations. That's what we need. All right, we're going to go ahead and take another phone call from Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I just wanted to say that, given what's going on in California where I live, with about the illegal alien voting, with the Becerra, the Attorney General, saying that he's going to turn his back and actually prosecute employers and organizations that comply with federal immigration law.
Yes.
Which is inviting a civil war, and then we have the FISA stuff that's going on right now, and it's not at all clear if that's even going to come out into the open. And if it does come into the open, it's not at all clear to me that anything will get done with it. And the question I want to pose is, given if that were to be the case, if this stuff were to be true, and either it is, which I believe it to be, I've had no doubts about that for a year and over a year, but if it were to be true and it were to be suppressed successfully by Congress and whatever, or if it were to be true and it were to become public and the media and the deep state basically let it go, would that not be the time when we have to just throw our hands in the air and say, this is not viable anymore? We have to really, truly not resist Trump, but really resist. What do you think?
I would agree. But again, in the spirit of Gandhi, I favor nonviolent non-cooperation. Just stop interacting with the government. Don't fill out the paperwork. Don't send them any checks. Just stop listening to them. And of course, the government will respond violently to that, as Great Britain did in India during Gandhi's time. But you're right. Knowing what is potentially in this memo and seeing how all of these agencies of the U.S. government are trying to protect this rotted, corrupt core of the deep state. Yeah, it does seem like this government has rendered itself illegitimate and illegal, and it does need to go. I'd still prefer the cash for clunkers approach, but who would pay for this current government?
Mike, I sent you a YouTube clip or some clip that I got, some video of we talked last week about the assassination of Park Chung-hee.
Yes.
And I told you about that press release. And I sent you that press release. It was on ABC, Frank Reynolds, if you remember him, talking about how
Yes.
it was an accidental discharge. And I just want to point that out. I was hoping maybe you might take a look at that and decide to put it up, because that's an example of clearly the most absurd thing ever. And by the way, they also said that 4 of his bodyguards were killed. But, you know, talk about a magic bullet. An accidental discharge that killed the president and 4 of his bodyguards. But nevertheless, and how it's pretty clear and how educated people didn't even know that that happened. There was no follow-up. The corporate media in 1979 swallowed that hook, line, and sinker, and no follow-up was ever done. That the head of the CIA could assassinate our guy, supposedly, and have no follow-up saying, looking into whether or not we were behind it, which of course we were, and then it goes away, like it disappears as a fact. Nobody really knew that happened. But at any rate, it just goes to show you how that kind of stuff goes on, and how bereft of any integrity or credibility the corporate media has been for 40 years. So.
Yeah. Since the end of World War II, after World War II was over, the CIA was looking at how the Nazis turned their media, mostly radio and newspapers, into this massive propaganda machine, and they started copying those methods. They started with Operation Mockingbird to make sure that all the corporate media has top executives who are CIA assets.
Yeah. And this is not some banana republic. This is South Korea. One of the a burgeoning economy, and one of the advanced economies on earth, even then, and we would do that with absolutely no legs to the story at all. We accept it. It was accidental discharge, blah blah blah, and no follow up whatsoever, and the story disappears. So
yes,
whatever.
No, that's how these things are going to be done. You know, you do the Boston Marathon bombing, and then you just say, this is what happened, and you don't talk about it anymore. Same thing with school shootings or various assassinations, or like this one up here with these Canadian billionaires who owned a pharmaceutical company that was doing business with the Clinton Foundation. When they were first found, murder-suicide, no question. And if the family hadn't hired their own investigators, that would have remained the official story.
And the Mandalay Bay, Las Vegas thing. I mean,
yes.
Every day something comes out that undercuts that story, which has no credibility at all. But
no, it didn't from day one.
So, at any rate, that's all I really wanted to say. But thank you for taking the call, Guy.
All right, you're welcome, and have a good day. We'll talk to you later on. We're going to go back to the news here. The phone lines are open if you want to call on in. And getting on to science and health issues, considering how busy the weekend was, I'm going through my news points very rapidly because normally we get a lot more calls here. But this season's flu is now officially classified an epidemic. And apparently the rate of young children requiring hospitalization doubled this last week. CDC is warning that apparently new strains of the flu are emerging. We're not just dealing with one flu or 3 flus, which is what we thought last week, but apparently these new strains are mutating and popping up all over. So this is a serious, serious problem. Apparently, an average of 100 people are dying of this flu every week in the United States. And I know it doesn't sound like it's a lot, but it could be the harbinger of things to come. So again, don't be heroic, don't be noble. If you start getting sick, if you start running a fever, you see your primary caregiver. And I know you're between a rock and a hard place, knowing that the orthodox medical establishment is more about pushing product than actually making you better. But this one is serious. I stay away from doctors and hospitals as much as I can, but obviously if I had appendicitis or something like that, I would have to go on in there. Remember the Women's March? They were out there screaming about, the future is female, and they were having a high old time. When it was all over, they had left a huge mess of trash all over the place. And I guess the thinking was some man will have to pick it up for us. All of this back in the 1990s. It's just more of the divide and conquer, keeping us angry at each other so we will not recognize the true source of the misery in our lives. And it's not the women, it's not the men, it's not the gays, it's not the straights, it's not the blacks, it's not the whites. It is that central federal government that is totally out of control. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take some phone calls, starting with Jerry in Chicago. Jerry, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. The last caller you were talking to, you mentioned something about Operation Mockingbird after World War I. I'm betting to say, World War II, 1945. I'm betting to say that it was longer than that. How about Orson Welles' War of the World, where they never, the CBS broadcast radio network never let on that this was just a skit or a play, and a lot of people took it serious.
Well, actually, CBS Radio was breaking in at all the station breaks and saying, this is a presentation of the Mercury Theater of the Air. And people either missed it, or they were so rattled by the script, they weren't paying attention. And as a matter of fact, propagandists did study that broadcast and its aftermath, to see what happened. And that led eventually to, something that was called, Project Barsoom, where they found this isolated town out in the middle of the western deserts, commandeered all of its communications, and basically did news broadcasts that there really was an alien invasion just to see what would happen to the people in the town, how badly they were panicked. And those people were not told that it was a play and a fake until after it was all over.
Okay. Well, I remember reading something one time that J.P. Morgan, back around 2008, had purchased either 80% of the newspapers out there or 80 major newspaper outlets.
Well, he would have had to have spread them all across the country, because back then there were laws that limited how much media any one entity could own within any one marketplace. But if you look at, basically 48 states, then that would basically be 2 media outlets in every state on average.
Okay. And one other thing, last night I happened to just stumble upon something, is that the FBI released information, I believe it was August of 2015, that said that they knew that Adolf Hitler was still alive and living down in Argentina with close to 10,000 other German Nazis or SS, whatever you want to call them.
Well, that's hardly surprising. They were never able to prove that the body that was left behind at the bunker really was Hitler. There's actually a TV series now on the so-called History Channel, Hunting Hitler, and a lot of what they're putting out there is obvious fluff. But they have documented a lot of stuff going on in South America where there are these German communities. You'll drive through and you'd swear you were in the Alpines because of the architecture. And I watched a few episodes and it was very fascinating. And then they did this one about this Bavarian town, in South America, and how it's surrounded by all this barbed wire and concrete and had all this, communication system set up. And they're trying to imply that Hitler was hiding out there after World War II. But I did a little bit of research and I found out, that actually it was commandeered and used by Pinochet as a torture center when Pinochet was in power. And I figure that information should have been available to the show's producer, but they're out there pushing this one idea and agenda. And so at that point, I quit watching the program.
Good for you, because the only true historian on that would be a guy by the name of Harry Cooper, from sharkhunters.com, who has been into the investigation of the Argentina connection and actually interviews a lot of people, takes a lot of pictures, and he puts on a real good spread on that website if you ever really want to look into something. So other than that, thanks for taking my call, and have a good one.
All right. Thank you very much. We will. Same to you. We're going to hang up on you right now. And if I had the luxury of time, there's all kinds of things I'd like to look into. But right now, I want to keep the show's focus on what's going on here and now and today. And that's why I never posted anything about hunting Hitler to the website. We're going to go back to the telephones now to Fred in Iowa. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
In the last 8 years, I've told well over 2,000 people not to get a flu shot. And I wonder if they run statistics and try to get the information, how many people and babies and older people and just middle-aged people in general that got the flu shot, what percentage of them got sick in the flu, and then what percentage of them that died. And, there's a lot of BS here, and it goes on every year. Yeah, well, it's a big to do. Well, anyhow, that's it for me. Somebody check it out. Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.
All right, have a good day. And the issue is, first of all, these large pharmaceutical corporations are never going to ask any questions where they're not going to like the answers. And obviously that kind of a study falls into that. We're going to take a break for more commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. The phone lines are now open, 800-313-9443. And I'm looking at this Ben Carrison cartoon about current events. It's called Hitting the Fan, and I will let you click on the link and find out for yourself what that actually means. Okay, now, apparently it is turning out that the Canadian climate is a little too harsh for the U.S. Navy. And the U.S. Navy's Freedom-class littoral combat ship, the USS Little Rock, is now trapped in ice in Montreal waterway, and they're saying it may have to spend the whole winter there before it can get underway. Apparently these littoral combat ships do not have ice-rated hulls. And apparently this ship has been behind schedule almost from the very beginning of its military duties. Very expensive, very fragile. We are having snow again here in Hawaii on the Big Island summits. It's a winter wonderland. There's a winter weather advisory in effect until 6 p.m. tonight. And there are going to be snow showers. They're expecting 3 to 5 inches, which doesn't sound like a lot, and it isn't a lot, but it is for here on Hawaii. Unfortunately, because of the icy conditions, the public is now not allowed to drive the roads up to the peaks, which is where the ski run would actually happen to be here. Now, a little bit of delicious irony over at Davos. Apparently they're dealing with 6 feet of snow, and it's just been coming down, and supposedly the World Economic Forum is just having a hard time getting to the venues. Apparently, the snow is so heavy, that some neighborhoods in Davos have been evacuated out of concern for avalanches. Gee, remember all the way back in March 20th, 2000? Snowfalls are now a thing of the past. And it was one of the most bizarre things, that this article went on and said, future generations will have to describe to their children what it was like to see the ground covered with snow and how beautiful and white it was. Take pictures. You'll have to show them pictures and tell them what it was like, because it's not going to happen anymore. Boy, were they ever wrong about that one. Tokyo's been hit by their heaviest snow since 2014. And apparently authorities are urging evening commuters to hurry home, and for those who have cars to brace for traffic disruptions. And apparently the Japanese Meteorological Agency has issued a warning to all of Tokyo's 23 wards. This is the first official heavy snow warning since February of 2014. So it's really out there. Meanwhile, here in the United States of America, all across the Midwest, they're getting whiteout conditions and blizzard warnings. And sadly, the founder of the Weather Channel, John Coleman, has passed away, and he was notorious for calling global warming a hoax. And of course, he was right. It was a hoax. It wasn't about the environment. It wasn't about anything other than scamming money for carbon credits or getting you to pay a carbon tax, to scream that the end of the world was nigh, and the only way you could save the earth was to agree to surrender more of your rights and more of your money to the purveyors of this hoax. And it's a scam. And year after year, record-setting winter after record-setting winter, they're still out there insisting, oh, well, just because there's snow where you are, it's broiling everywhere else. Or my favorite, global warming causes colder weather. They really do have a low opinion of your mentality and your intellect. Or maybe we're just hoping Common Core would have the younger generation so messed up they wouldn't realize the inherent contradiction of claiming that global warming is causing colder weather. Now, speaking of the Weather Channel, I have their little app here on my iPhone, and I have to tell you, I am not impressed, because over the weekend we had a lot of stuff that Claire and I had to do, including, unfortunately, dealing with a funeral. The wife of one of the pastors at Claire's church passed away. She'd been ill for a very long time, and they had this huge memorial service scheduled for Sunday. And the crowd was so huge, they literally had shuttle buses coming in from remote parking. They had a live video feed into other rooms in the campus. It was a huge, huge deal. Now, starting last Thursday, the Weather Channel was predicting thunder showers for Sunday, which was going to complicate things. Same thing on Friday, same thing on Saturday. Right up until Saturday night, they were saying, going to be thunder showers. Then the next morning, the skies are clear, and then the Weather Channel app is saying, yeah, it's going to be a sunny day. Then we get to about noon, and it goes back to thunder showers. And at the end of the day, no thunder showers. And we hadn't had any. Now they're saying they're going to be thunderstorms tomorrow. But at this point, I'm ready to uninstall the app. It's really kind of useless. They're relying too much on these computer models and not enough on, let's look out the window and see what the weather is doing. I mean, we're out here in the middle of the ocean, a little tiny island. There's not a lot of terrain around us to complicate the solution to the weather patterns. And they still can't get it right. And yet these same so-called experts are absolutely convinced that they can predict that the Earth is going to rise by Earth's temperature will rise by 2 degrees centigrade by the year 2050. They've now pushed it way, way off. They're not going to make any short-term predictions because they don't work out. Look at all the doomsaying predictions from the 1990s. None of them worked out. Kind of reminds me of the Jehovah's Witnesses, who were always predicting the end of the world. And the days kept coming, the world was still there, and so now the Jehovah's Witnesses don't do that prediction thing anymore. And all the predictions coming from the global warming people are for way, way ahead in the future, probably after most of us are going to be dead. They're playing that same game. And it is a scam. Anybody who doesn't think there's such a thing as conspiracies, we've got one right here, laid out on the dissecting table to look at. And it involved certainly Al Gore and his carbon brokerages. It involved the Hadley Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia, where they had the leaked emails and computer codes showing it was a hoax. It was a fraud. Hide the decline. NASA was part of it. NOAA was part of it. All the so-called science channels on TV were part of it. They were pushing it in National Geographic. There was just this huge, huge push to declare that the world was roasting and you've got to pay for it. And you would think with real scientists, they would look at the fact that we are cooling and say, oh, the problem is solved. And they'd go on about other efforts. But that's not happened. Last week, I was actually seeing more of these news stories about how 2017 was the hottest year on record. Pay no attention to all that snow and ice. Just look at these very pretty colored charts we have here. That 2017 was the hottest year on record. No shame these people have. No shame at all. They're just out there pushing this. And I don't know if they still think that they can get people to buy carbon credits or not, or if they can still get us to pay carbon taxes when people are struggling to pay the taxes they already have. Certainly from the point of view of the media, their goal is to try and emerge out of this with their reputations intact. Same thing for the academics who sold their honor to the global warming agenda. How do they get out of there with their reputations intact? So they may spend the rest of their lives pushing global warming, rather than have to admit, yeah, they blew that one. And it's probably time for me to repost my article on ClimateGate, which goes through this whole history of all these lies that people are told by their governments to manipulate them, to get things out of them. And I think the global warming agenda was part of the plan for the New World Order, because the New World Order appeared to be founded on three different pillars. The first was a global pandemic requiring surrendering our sovereignty to a global health authority. They tried that in 2009 with the When Pigs Fly flu. And apparently our current serious flu season has caught them all off guard. They weren't ready for it, to use it as propaganda. Then the second pillar was human-caused global warming. You humans are destroying the earth. You must surrender your sovereignty and your freedom and your money to a global environmental authority. And the last one, of course, is a global economic collapse requiring the establishment of a global private central bank. That last one still seems to be working here. All right, let's talk about computers here. And just to mention here, I'm still dealing with all of the issues related to being forced to upgrade my server because of the Spectre and Meltdown bugs. That being said, the new server is much, much faster than the old one. We can support a lot more traffic, and so far it's running very smoothly. But there are things that on the website that broke that I'm trying to fix, like the chat that is supposed to go with the streaming video. And by the way, if anybody has a suggestion for a decent, hopefully very inexpensive video streaming to replace this YouTube headache, please email it in, because I need all the help I can get right now to get this stuff up and running. Now, Julian Assange is out there sounding a warning over what he is calling AI censorship, and basically saying that the corporate social media companies like YouTube, Facebook, so forth, are allowing artificially intelligent systems to scan content. Now, if they were scanning content to get rid of things like calls to violence or child porn or sexting, blackmail, I would be okay with this. But it has come out repeatedly over the last couple of months that these AI censorship systems are targeting conservative thought. So the policy from these social media companies, the big corporate social media companies, and a very good reason to move to one of the new up-and-coming social media companies that still honor the First Amendment. The goal of these big corporate media companies is that you only see the liberal side of every single debate, just like you do on corporate TV news, corporate radio news, the newspapers. They're literally trying to silence the conservative point of view in this country. They could trigger a civil war with some of this stuff. Now then, over at Apple, they're not exactly having a very good time. Their earnings are down. They too have been caught up with these processor bugs, which may actually be NSA mandated backdoors. And there is now actually talk that Apple may cancel the iPhone X this summer. The sales have been disappointing. And apparently the problem is that $1,000 per handset price tag, along with the fact that there really isn't anything all that new and innovative in the phone other than the facial recognition, which doesn't seem to be working all that well. They should have stayed with the fingerprint scanner. That's a good one. And yes, I know it can be hacked, but it's already been demonstrated that you can hack the iPhone X's facial recognition. It was done with a 3D printed face and some cutouts from photographs of the individual involved. So this may be the first time Apple has canceled a phone model since the iPhone 5C in 2014, which I think that was actually the one that I had before I got my iPhone 7. And I'm very happy with the iPhone 7. I don't know if it's going to get slowed down when they finally patch it for all these back doors and stuff. Okay, phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. I need some phone calls because I'm running out of things to talk about here. Somebody just sent me an email saying little boys who lie to their mothers grow up to be weathermen. Well, that may be what's going on. And yeah, weather is chaotic and it is difficult to predict. In fact, I'm going to share an interesting story. One of the world's first true supercomputers was called Aiea 4. And it was built supposedly to provide accurate week ahead weather forecasting. And the idea was they were going to have these sensor arrays all over the globe, or as much of the globe as they could get to, that would feed data into Aiea 4, which would then spit out these highly accurate week ahead weather forecasts. And it didn't work out. And the study of why it didn't work out is what led to the field of chaos theory, just in case you wondered where that came from. And again, I know that the weather forecasting, at least here in Hawaii, is worthless more than 2 days out. During our hurricane season, we'd look at that little map where they'd have the 5-day track forecast, and the next day that far end of the track would be completely different, and the day after it was basically switching back and forth like a snake on meth. But they leave it up there because it makes it look impressive. Oh, they're able to predict 5 days ahead. No, they're not. Now, getting back to that issue of automating labor, displacing human workers, which means those human workers won't have jobs and won't have money to pour back into the economy. There's a little bit of good news out there because apparently over in Great Britain, their first cyborg shop assistant, actually it's not a cyborg, it's a robot. Cyborg includes biological tissue, and I don't think this thing has it. But it was Fabio the Pepper robot, produced by Japanese company SoftBank, was hired as a retail assistant at a Margio supermarket in Edinburgh, Scotland, as part of an experiment run by Heriot-Watt University for the BBC documentary 6 Robots and Us. And apparently it has been fired for incompetence after just 1 week on the job. So the robot revolution in retail may be much further off than anybody was thinking. And maybe that'll give us time for a rethink on this. Because you cannot have an economy where jobs are being taken away from people and they're no longer able to support that economy. All the money is poured up at the top, but there aren't enough of those 1%ers to go around to the malls and buy up all that product. How many flat screen TVs can you have? We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back with a phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take a telephone call from Terry in California. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I heard my brother told me that since they can't find anything on this Russian gate to pin on Trump, excuse me, they're going to start investigating his businesses, and they know they can find something there. Of all, go back decades and decades, And they know anybody that made that kind of money has got some kind of skeleton in there, and eventually the outcome is going to be money laundering.
Well, the problem is that impeachment only applies to what Trump has done while he's in office. They can probably go back and try and prosecute him for some of these crimes, but they can't go back too far because of the statute of limitations.
Right. I'm trying to figure him out because, if he's fighting the deep state, isn't Israel largely part of the deep state? I mean, and on one hand, he's fighting the deep state. On the other hand, he's bowing down to Netanyahu. So straighten me out.
Well, it's entirely possible that they've already found something in Trump's past that they can use to blackmail and control him. As a matter of fact, the story that I'm hearing is that this bogus Russian dossier, they didn't originally intend to make it public. But apparently they presented it to Donald Trump and said, we've got the goods on you now, and you will do what we tell you to do, or it'll be made public. And Trump looked at it and said, this is complete junk. Go ahead and make it public. And at that point, McCain walked it over to the FBI. And it was used to get these FISA warrants. And now, of course, the investigation into the investigation seems to have hit pay dirt on how all this stuff went down.
Right. Okay, Mike, I just wanted to run that by you. We'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. And we're going to let you go here. Yeah, the deep state corruption, they are afraid. They're obviously afraid. Bit by bit, progress is being made by those few remaining honorable people in the Department of Justice and the FBI. And let's not forget Judicial Watch. They're the tip of the spear on all of this, and they're digging this stuff out. And it's up to us in the independent media and you as ordinary citizens to make sure as many people see this as possible. Because people who are just plugged into TV, they're not getting any of this information. In fact, Claire was commenting the other day when she was at church. She was stunned that hardly anybody knew Turkey had invaded Syria. And these are very, very important issues, and we need to get that on out there. Okay, getting on back to the world of computers. By the way, the phone lines are open again. Apparently more than 100 non-government organizations and government agencies around the world help police YouTube for extremist content, ranging from so-called hate speech to terrorist recruiting videos. And all of them have confidentiality agreements barring Google, which is YouTube's parent company, from revealing their participation to the public. But apparently there are now lawsuits that are being filed to force the disclosure of just who is it who has their hand on the button when it comes to censorship on Google and YouTube. We got to take a break for station identification. Back with hour number 3 after these few words. And aloha America, welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I want to step on back to this issue of the lost text messages over at the FBI between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, and the FBI saying they've lost them. They're blaming it on a misconfiguration error. Ooh, we misconfigured. But now another source has come on forward saying that no, the texts were available last summer. And apparently there were copies of them. Apparently the Government Affairs Committee received 384 pages of these text messages. So the FBI is flat out lying. They're trying to make this go away. Because this investigation into the investigation is showing that the first investigation was a flat out cover-up. It was a whitewash of very serious crimes committed by top officials. Now, Congressman Dave Joyce is out there saying, we can find the lost FBI texts. And I certainly hope they do. And probably the NSA has them. Remember, it turned out the NSA actually has Hillary's missing emails. And they offered to provide them to the FBI under James Comey, and James Comey said no. Now, what's lying at the heart of all of this is drug corruption. And it goes all the way back to Arkansas in the 1980s, when the CIA was running an illegal operation to smuggle guns down to Nicaragua to arm the Contras against the Sandinistas. And because it was an illegal operation, they couldn't use taxpayer money to do it, so they funded it by smuggling huge amounts of cocaine back into the United States on the same aircraft that were sending the guns down. They were selling it across America, out in Los Angeles Freeway, Ricky Ross. And then Bill Clinton was providing operational security by keeping the state drug investigators away from those certain airports, and then set up this loose network of banks and land flip deals to launder the money and pay it back out through the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, which was written by Webb Hubbell and signed into law by Bill Clinton. And everybody was getting a taste of the action. Now, that was back in the 1980s. Just imagine how that web of corruption has grown since then, like a cancer at the heart of our system. Everybody's dirty one way or the other. They're using the Clinton Foundation as a tax shelter or a money laundry, or they've dipped into the Uranium One deal. And now we have this new scandal that's surfacing about this 30-year lease for a shipping container port down in Florida. And it's all the same people. All the same people. And everyone's saying, why are they not going to jail? Well, they see themselves as above the law, and for a lot of years they have been above the law. And I do wish Donald Trump would find some way to actually start doing something about this. But at this point, it's obvious he's controlled, he's corralled. I mean, at the very least, Donald Trump has the authority to declassify that FISA memo and say, put it out there. All right, we're going to take some phone calls here. Mike in Colorado, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, thank you for taking my call, sir. Great show today. I called because there's an email scam going around, and not necessarily so you knew, but my folks listen to you, and they're not real tech savvy. It's a $5 million USD donation from Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation. And it has a Mr. Bill 1102 at Outlook.com email address.
Yeah. Oh,
and boy. I just got
there
it.
Are so many scams. I'm sorry?
Yeah. No, I said I just got it, and I think people need to, if they ever get something like that, if you won money, they'll call you.
Yes. I mean, people like Bill Gates, they don't give money away to just random strangers. They'll give it to a charity that supports their agenda, which in Bill Gates' case is vaccines and population control, or they'll donate it to some place where they get some positive press out of it. But no money junkie just hands a bunch of cash to a totally random stranger. Publishers Clearinghouse has the lock on that particular thing.
All right, thanks for taking my call.
All right, you got it. Thanks an awful lot. Right now, the scammers are having a field day. Nobody's paying attention to them. Our central federal government is fighting with itself. The states are fighting over the immigration issue, and the scams are out there, ransomware. And so, yeah, everything that you get, you have to be very, very careful about, because there are a lot of scams out there, and they do prey, unfortunately, on the elderly who are mentally starting their decline, and they're not tech savvy, and they don't understand how these things will actually work. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hello, Mike. Yeah, I have a great comment. Why doesn't the Federal Reserve change its name to the Central Bank of America? Like you said, it's not more federal than Federal Express, and it's just confusing the people.
Well, when they were first setting it on up, I mean, we had two of these banks before, the First Bank of the United States, the Second Bank of the United States, and they were both eventually shut down by honest politicians in government, which are now an endangered species. So when they were setting up the third one, they realized calling it the Third Bank of the United States would remind people with any kind of a memory how abusive those earlier banks had been. So they called it the Federal Reserve to make it look like it's part of the federal government. That's part of the fraud. That's part of the hoax. But it isn't. There's a video of Alan Greenspan out there saying the Federal Reserve answers to no federal government authority. They are a force unto themselves.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, Amazon has launched a new pilot project called the Amazon Go Supermarket. And it has no checkouts. And what it does is you will basically, when you go into the store, you scan your smartphone with the Amazon Go app at a turnstile. Then you just walk around picking up what you want and you leave. And the way it works is there are scales built into the shelves to make sure, you know, what size product you're taking. And you are tracked by cameras. So it knows what you have bought and your account is going to be charged with it. Given the problems with facial recognition, I have a feeling this thing is going to have issues. And I know it sounds wonderfully convenient to just walk on in, grab your product and walk on out if you are in fact accurately being billed. But again, my concern is that there are no cashiers in the store. Those jobs are gone. And I presume that Amazon, just like they're using robots to stock their warehouses, are probably going to be using robots to stock the shelves in this supermarket. So there's going to be virtually no human employment there at all, except for the service technicians, who are not going to be full-time, and quite probably a security guard to deal with issues there. And I know it sounds all cool and high-tech, but it's a wrong direction. There was a movie a while back called Dave about this guy who was a presidential lookalike, and Kevin Kline starred in it. And he sort of broke free. He was hired literally to replace the real president who'd suffered a stroke. And when he started breaking free of his handlers, and he got out there and he said, I want to talk about a jobs program. I want to see that every American who wants a job, there's a job out there for them. And it was one of the best moments in the entire movie. And it's a great movie. It's a funny movie. And Sigourney Weaver is in it. Frank Langella is in it. It's a good cast. And that was the moment where I said, yeah, that's what government should be doing. Taking care that the people have the means to have a decent life. And is that such an outrageous requirement for us to expect from our government? I mean, the definition of government back when this nation was founded was that government exists to organize for the community that which the community cannot organize for itself. That's a good definition. Right now, our government is just fully on board with the money junkies, harvesting as much wealth as they can. And maybe it's because they know the party's not going to last much longer. So they're just grabbing everything they can, heading for someplace without extradition. But this idea of increasing automation and outsourcing, the real unemployment in this country is hovering around 30%. That's actually above the unemployment rate during the Depression of the 1930s. And they keep trying to reassure us and say it's only 4.1%. It's a big lie. It's a big lie. And as I've said before, we're heading toward a situation where we're going to have robots in factories building all the products, robotic trucks delivering the products to the shopping malls, robots stocking the shelves, and robots there to act as the salespeople. And they're going to be standing around with nothing to do because all the people who lost their jobs are not going to be coming into the mall to buy anything. And I cannot comprehend why our economists don't see this coming. I really don't. Now, Claire and I are finally getting ready to replace our 18-year-old Honda. We have really pushed it as far as we can reasonably. And I'm not complaining. It's an 18-year-old Honda, and it's still running. It's showing its age. The air conditioning quit. and because of what happened when the car got stolen, the ignition switch is weird. But it's held up. I love it. I absolutely love it. And we're going to get another Honda. And I'm not going to get a brand new one because according to this article coming out of Blacklisted News, apparently the new cars being sold in the United States and Europe, they're all connected, whether you want it or not. They have some mechanism for sending data, exchanging data with their manufacturers after the cars are sold. And apparently these cars will stream or batch upload location data and other telemetry to the manufacturers, who argue that they're allowed to do all this thanks to the explicit consent of the car owners, who signed a very lengthy purchase contract that contains a vague and misleading clause deep in its fine print. And these car manufacturers are warehousing this data. That leaves it vulnerable to leaks, breaches, hackers, search warrants, government hacking, unethical employee snooping. And they can't explain why they're saving it or how they're using it. Now, I imagine some of it is going to go to marketing companies that want to see where you're driving as yet another part of your consumer profile that explains your buying habits to advertisers so that they can send you targeted ads. Lately, I've gotten an almost sense of desperation from the ads. I went out to one website looking at prices for used cars on this island, and I got flooded with all these emails from all these dealerships. Come on over, we'll make a deal, we'll do this, we'll do that. Even got a few phone calls. And I understand why. They can't move the product. Again, people do not have the money. I've noticed the ads we see online are getting more aggressive, assertive, and they're not going to work. But unfortunately, the online advertisers, they get paid per click. They're not compensated based on whether the ad is working and the sales are being generated. And I worked in advertising a long time ago, and one thing I learned is you do not annoy a potential customer, or you've lost the sale. It's gone. Now, getting into some of the other issues about health and science, article coming out on Natural Blaze talking about the American water crisis. It's just around the corner, and no one is talking about it. And they mention briefly the problem with corporatization of water resources, large corporations like Nestle buying up sources of fresh water to rebottle. But they're saying there's another issue, and it's not Coca-Cola and it's not property rights. It is the now coast-to-coast failure of municipalities, states, and the federal government to ensure that drinking water is actually drinkable. Now, all this, of course, started back with Flint, Michigan, when somebody realized there were high lead content in the water. And it was a big stink because the city of Flint, Michigan, to save a few dollars, had unhooked Flint's water supply from their previous water provider. And they'd simply started pumping water out of the Flint River. And it went through some filters and everything to make it look like it was clean. And to save a few more dollars, they did not bother adding an anti-corrosion chemical. So the water started leaching lead and other heavy metals out of the walls of the pipes, and it got into the drinking water. Now, since then, Erin Brockovich, you'll remember her from the PG&E hexavalent chromium incident, she has now started a project. They're testing water from all over the country, and they're finding this is a problem pretty much everywhere. Now, if you're concerned about your drinking water, and you probably are, you can go on out on eBay and you can get a testing kit for your water. I did this here on Oahu, and it turns out our water is actually very good coming right out of the faucet, except, of course, it's very hard because we're sucking it out from inside an extinct volcano. But this test covered lead, other heavy metals, bacterial content, the hardness of the water, and so forth. It's about $30, I think, and I think for anybody who's concerned about the safety of their water, it's a good investment. All right, we're going to take a couple of phone calls. Melody in Colorado, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, I just wanted to tell you what my experience with, I bought an older Honda. I bought an 07, and the way the company tracks you is through your registration when it changes. Because I bought it from a private owner, and I still got contacted by the company. They know, where it goes. So,
well, yeah, they're watching pretty much everything here, and they would obviously be concerned about somebody who buys a car and then doesn't register it. We're probably I've been looking at private party sales, but there's been a big problem with a lot of these hookup websites where you say, I'm looking for whatever, and basically they'll come on over and they'll rob you for whatever money you have. And so Claire and I are probably going to...
I've experienced that. It just happened to be mine was a neighbor, so I didn't have a problem with that part. I just know that I started getting recall notices from the company right away after I registered the vehicle. So,
well, Claire and I are probably going to go to this Honda dealership on this island. Many years ago, when I was still working in film and television, I had a gig editing their sales videos, a half-hour video. These are the cars we've got on the lot right now. So hopefully they remember me fondly, and I'll get a little bit more traction with them.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Don in the Philippines, and Don, I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What is on your mind today?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, you're talking about automobiles. It seems to me they can track you down. If you have Sirius radio in there, wouldn't that automatically, Sirius can track you down and know where you are all the time?
No, Sirius is a one-way system only. What they can track you through, first of all, they can track you just from your cell phone. But if your car has any of the embedded Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, they can track you through the internet system, through the cell towers. And it's whether they have anything else in there that we don't know about, like a GPS. Who knows what's in there? You are actually forbidden from looking inside the electronics of your car by the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And that is very scary. They could have anything in there at all. Okay?
It's just like farmers. Farmers can't, it used to be, when I was a kid, everybody knew that a farmer was a good mechanic because they had to be able to fix their tractor and everything. Now they can't. By law, they can't go in there.
Was built to be repaired. All right, Don, stay on the line. Stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Don in the Philippines. And Don, I grew up in farming country. I'm a farm kid. And people had to know how to repair their own machinery, the tractors, whatever, because we're so far away from the urban centers. That was the only option. If you couldn't fix your machinery yourself, you were going to be stuck. The other aspect of that is that all of that farm equipment was built specifically to be repairable by its owner. The bolts were just out there. Everything was visible. They were designed to be taken apart and put back together very, very easily. And unfortunately today, the business model is that you get your phone and you use it up. And if the battery goes dead, you just get a new phone. And it annoys me no end that all these people screaming about the environment and global warming and all the rest of it, they don't challenge this model of commerce, of planned obsolescence, of mine the natural resources, make a product that gets used for a couple of years, and then it goes into a landfill, toxifying the water in the area. Because we should have reusable, repairable products, and some states are actually now looking at what are called the right to repair laws, so that people who are not able to go on out and buy a new version of whatever can fix it themselves. I remember TVs when I was a kid with the vacuum tubes inside. They'd burn out. You'd go down to the electronics store, or even the thrifty drugstore had a tube tester. And you could just test your tube and buy a new one and get the TV up and running again. That was great stuff. Now, the new flat panel TVs, if something goes wrong, they're gone. You get that extended warranty. We had the TV before the one we have now. just developed these black vertical lines on the screen. And we went to the extended warranty and they said, nah, can't fix it. Can't get the parts. You get a new TV. So it worked out well for us. Don, what do you want to add to that?
Well, on the cars, another thing about it, I just got a new car, and I didn't have any choice on it, but they got this, you don't put the key in there and turn the ignition anymore. You're supposed to carry the fob in your pocket, and that's it, and then it's, you press a button. And to me, that seems like it's a health issue. I don't know exactly how this works, but you got some kind of, waves of some kind going from your pocket to the machine there, right?
Well, they're very, very low power. I mean, when you consider that fob is effectively on all the time, it's a very low power device, probably on the same power levels, as Bluetooth, because you don't want to accidentally, activate the car next door to you. Claire and I, we're not getting a new car, we're just getting a newer car. And, so we won't probably be dealing with that.
On the automobiles, it seems to me, since there's a lot of people like you, I got more electronics than I need in that car. It seems to me some entrepreneur could come up with a low-tech car. Hey, here we have a car with no, it would fill a niche for people that don't want a whole hell of a lot of electronics in their car, which is, overall, I don't think it's healthy for you to have all this electronics, and you're in that small area right next to you, and you're driving, a lot of hours a day. And
it's also a distraction. Right. I mean, the only thing that Claire and I are looking for, if we decide to go ahead and buy a newer car, we'd like a backup camera, but that's it. We don't want any of that other stuff. But believe it or not, some of the top-end supercars, cars that are going for $200,000, they don't have the electronics because they want to save the weight, because the people who buy those cars, they want to go fast and they don't want to have anything to think about other than driving very, very fast. There's a cute little car called the Atom. It's like a street legal dune buggy that goes very fast. No electronics on that either.
Yeah, I'll let you go, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Bob in Colorado. And Bob, I'm going to have to take you through this next commercial break. What's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to thank you for the response back about the bumper music. I got that today. And talking about how things really pay attention to what you're doing. During the playoffs, they said on Yahoo Sports that you could watch the playoffs for free if you download Yahoo Sports app, and you could watch the playoffs. So I went ahead, I downloaded the app. The playoffs, it was in and out. It was driving me crazy because the signal was horrible. But I figured, you know what, I'm not going to sit there and watch it on my little phone, so I had this thing called Mirrorcast. So I went ahead, I hooked up the Mirrorcast, and immediately the show went off of the NFL, and it said you cannot use Mirrorcast while watching the NFL football game. And it freaked me out, man. It knew that I was using this little Wi-Fi device to put it on my big screen TV, and immediately the NFL playoffs went off the phone, and I had to actually shut everything down and then put it back on. But again, the signal was so bad, I just ended up listening to it on the radio. But I thought that was like, you've got to be kidding me, man. That freaked me out. So I just thought I'd give you that little tidbit. I'll listen off air.
Yeah, there are always a bunch of rules there where they're trying to say if you want to watch it on high def, you should pay for it. So the phone version is like a lost lead. All right, Bob, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and listening to that last phone call. Even our entertainment systems have become overly complicated, and because of the ability to do certain things, when contracts are signed for certain content to appear on certain platforms, the lawyers will come on in and say, well, can't be shown in this area, can't be sent on over to the big screen TV, and they're able to do that because of what's put inside the electronic devices. And they're always, and it's more make work for the lawyers than it is anything else. just to do that. And I've noticed a lot of times when we'll save something to the DVR, where occasionally the fast forward button is disabled so that you have to sit through the commercials, and they love to do that sort of thing. But as with any complex system, there's always the possibility of a mistake. And this brings us to Marvel's latest superhero movie, Thor Ragnarok, which was due to be released digitally on the 19th of this month, which I guess was 2 days ago. And apparently some kind of a blunder at Apple resulted in people using Movies Anywhere and Vudu got it much, much earlier via iTunes. And apparently copies were all over the internet and being pirated at a furious, furious rate. And folks, I do have to say something here, okay? If you engage in content piracy, forget about the fact that it's illegal. There are two aspects. One, the studios like to point at content pirates as the reason they're not doing good business, which is why, where I think it really is the content itself, such as Thor Ragnarok, which I have not seen yet, and I'm not strongly inclined to tune in on it. The other part of it is, if you're not paying for the movies that you watch, soon there will be no more movies. If you like an artist's music, please buy the CD or the MP3 download, or that band is going to go out of business. That's just common sense. It is the right, moral, and polite thing to do, to reward those creative people whose work that you like by doing business with them. So please do not do that. Many, many years ago, somebody got into Claire's music computer when we were living on Kaonohi side, and they copied off the entire Isle of Sanctuary to a server in China. For all we know, there are bootleg copies of Isle of Sanctuary floating all through the markets over there. All right, let's get on back to the science and health news. By the way, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Apparently, an investigation by the British Medical Journal has exposed a horrifying vaccine scandal that took place in the same place where a lot of unethical vaccine stories come from. This is Africa. And apparently babies were used down there as guinea pigs to test out a vaccine after the monkeys it was tested on died. Now, according to the report, British Medical Journal, nearly 1,400 infants in South Africa were given an experimental vaccine for tuberculosis by academics from Oxford University that was linked to monkey fatalities in tests. And apparently the parents were not told this was experimental. And apparently on the monkeys, when they did the monkey test, 5 out of the 6 monkeys in the trial became so ill they had to be euthanized. They had to be put down. And you have to wonder why these babies are given such a potentially dangerous shot. Now, we have not heard any reports of what happened to these babies if they became ill. Another good movie, The Constant Gardener, Ralph Fiennes and Rachel Weisz. And it's based on a true story about unethical medical trials in Africa. That's another good one to hunt on down there. Boy, I miss good movies like those. Apparently, the pro-vaxxers, people who are pro-vaccine, invested in the vaccine companies, are now getting so upset at us vaccine critics, us vaccine doubters. They're now resorting literally to violence. And according to this story that came out of DC Clothesline, there was this Dr. David Gorski, basically out there pushing vaccine propaganda, aided by Jimmy Kimmel. And apparently in the last 48 hours, Dr. Suzanne Humphreys, creator of the Honesty versus Policy presentation and author of Dissolving Illusions, which expertly dismantles the most persistent myths of the pseudoscience of vaccine industry, herd immunity, basically got a shockingly detailed death threat that promises a suicide mission, mass shooting at a public autism event. That's it. She was threatened that if they have this event talking about autism and vaccines, that there will be a mass shooting. All in the name of preserving the profits. Because in our country, if it makes money, it's good. Who cares about all those other fluffy issues like patient safety? If it makes money, it's good. If it's losing money, that's bad. And all of the other concerns, qualities, are subordinate to that. And that's not the way it should be. There needs to be a balance. It's okay to want to be rich, but it has to be blended with wanting to do a good job, wanting to come up with a good product to become rich. And again, the idols I hold up are people like Steve Jobs, James Cameron, George Lucas, who do what they love, did it very good, and they became rich. And I don't think any of them set on out saying, I'm going to do this so I become rich. Steve Jobs wanted to give American hobbyists a home computer. George Lucas likes to tell stories. Same with James Cameron. This is the way it's supposed to work. This is the way capitalism is supposed to work. Not just put out a dangerous, lousy product, bribe the government to look the other way and rake in the dough. Now, speaking of goofs and things, talking about Hawaii here, apparently the graphic that was put on out to explain our fake missile alert of last week is not the one that's actually being used. Apparently, Hawaii's Emergency Management Agency changed software vendors. And apparently the new interface does include things like a confirm button. So the emergency message could not be sent just with one click. So that part of the story, that's breaking down. As you know, our local government was criticized, and rightly so, for taking 38 minutes to get out the message that the first message was in error. 38 minutes. And of course, they know the message had gone out. It was popping up on all of their cell phones. It's popping up on the TV. And Governor Ige and the administrator for the Emergency Management Agency, Vern Miag, said they had to wait for permission from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. FEMA has said, no, that is not true. States are obviously going to be authorized to cancel or retract erroneous warning messages on their own. Now, fortunately, not everybody had to wait the 38 minutes because some of our local TV news channels, when they called up the Emergency Management Agency and found out what was going on, they got it out on the regular local news broadcast. So that took about 20 minutes to happen. Now, I thought this false alarm thing was going to quickly fade away. It hasn't. People are still talking about it, and they're very, very angry. Now, what I think is probably what was going on because of the second false alarm over in Japan 2 days later, I think it was a test. I think they sent out the warning to see how the public would react. Just like that Project Barsoom out in the Western Desert. We're going to tell everybody the Martians are invading for real. See how they react. Government loves to do that sort of thing. So that is right now my favorite theory. There is another one circulating around though, and that is that apparently defense contractors have been approaching Hawaii about a new shore-based ballistic missile defense system called Aegis Ashore. Well, we've got a whole harbor full of Aegis ships down there. And we used to have a Nike Hercules site over there out toward the west. It's now a solar observatory. But it looks like, what if this was a sales stunt? What if this was a sales thing? Oh, Hawaii doesn't want to buy our missile defense system. Well, we'll fake a missile alert. get everybody riled up and supportive of it. But apparently, the local government is saying, we do have a harbor full of Aegis ships, and we don't need a shore-based system. That's what's going on out there. Now, this is a very sad story. This is coming out of truthnews.com, and I saw it in a couple of other places. It's getting a lot of traction. Apparently, there was this soldier, Bob Curry. He's now 64 years old. He was known as Backdoor Bob because he was the first to storm the Iranian embassy in London during the 1980 siege. And he put his life on the line to save others. And he came on back to Britain and he started a business. The business went bust. He is now homeless. A war hero and veteran is homeless on the streets of Hawaii. And the reason this has become a stink is apparently a former terrorist, or maybe he's a current terrorist who's been brought in under the refugee program, is currently living at taxpayer expense in a London home. Now that to me is a very screwed up set of priorities. Regardless of whether you agree with the wars or not, and I don't, all of us owe a debt of honor to everybody who put on that uniform and obeyed their orders, even if those orders were illegal, even if they were war crimes, even though we know the civilian leadership is just out there trying to conquer the world and make it safe for the U.S. dollar again. Those people who put on that uniform, they deserve our respect, they deserve our assistance. And the fact that the government, whose dirty work that they did, has just abandoned them is an object lesson that ought to be shown to any young person seriously considering entering military service. And I know a lot of young people are doing that because there isn't anything else for them to do as they get out of school. And that is shameful. I mean, the sheer number of homeless in general in this country is shameful. The number of homeless veterans is shameful. And all our government can talk about is open borders and bring in more illegal immigrants and register them to vote out there in California. I got an email on that very topic. Apparently this has actually been going on for quite a while because of what's called the motor voter law. And I remember that from when I lived in California. When you get a driver's license, and I'm rather amazed that illegal immigrants are being given driver's licenses. That's a Title VIII violation right there. You are given the opportunity to register to vote. So again, they're just registering all these illegal immigrants, knowing that they will vote Democratic. Now, as another sign of the desperation by the deep state against Donald Trump, it looks like this whole Russia collusion thing is falling apart, and it's about to backfire on the Department of Justice under Loretta Lynch, the FBI under James Comey. It's going to backfire on the Hillary Clinton campaign. So what are they out there doing now? Oh, now the new job is to try and portray Trump as an anti-Irish bigot. They've worn out racism, blacks and Hispanics, and now they're trying to portray him as an anti-Irish bigot. And that's a little out there. And not because the Irish don't represent a significant voting bloc in this country. But what are they going to do? Go down the list of every nationality? Oh, Trump is an anti-French bigot. He's an anti-British bigot. He's an anti-German bigot. I don't think they realize just how ridiculous this is looking. They've just done it so many times. Okay. All right, I'm getting a lot more emails from people saying that the video streaming is not working. And yes, I understand it's not working. I did a misconfiguration. Obviously, I cannot fix it while I'm doing the radio show. But I will try and get it up and running this afternoon. It's on my very long list of things to try and fix on the new server. Getting on back to homelessness in this country, apparently Atlanta officials, in order to deal with the cold weather, are moving the homeless into the airport. So they're going to try and let them shelter there. here's political correctness again, and this is silly. Back to Oxford University, the same one that was connected with that vaccine test down in Africa. Apparently, in order to level the playing field between men and women, Oxford University will allow women to have extra time on their summer exams in an effort to raise the test scores in math and science fields. And women who are taking these exams will have an extra 15 minutes to complete the test, despite the fact that no changes were made to adjust the difficulty level of the questions or number of questions that were on the test. Well, this is handing an unfair advantage to the women. And more than that, it's portraying women as automatically inferior to men in science and math. And I don't think either of these are something that women want to be dealing with. The women I know that want to be seen as equal to men want to be seen as equal to men, not simply getting ahead because they're given a special advantage. But this is utterly ridiculous. What's Oxford going to do now? Everybody gets an A. No competition, no harm to your self-esteem, everybody gets an A, which would make an Oxford degree utterly worthless. Schools and universities are supposed to be meritocracies. They're supposed to have you competing against everybody else on an equal footing. All right, we got to take our last commercial break of the show today. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today. We're going to take one more phone call from Charlie in Los Angeles. Aloha, Charlie. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I just want to make a comment on the difference of men and women. I'm not including the Williams sisters in the tennis circuit, but if you take the number one white female tennis player in the world and just go to any top 10 college in America and find they're better than average tennis player, male tennis player on their team, can kill her on the court. Men
are naturally stronger than women are. I mean, that's an unavoidable fact. But this idea where we have these two competing genders, where each is trying to politicize an advantage. We're not talking about tennis. We're talking about math and science, where in theory women are the equal of men intellectually. Of course, whatever differences there may be between the male and female mind, the variance in native intelligence is going to completely overwhelm that. What are they going to start doing now? Giving you more time on your exams the lower your IQ is?
Well, Mike, let me tell you, I got plenty of experience working with the opposite sex in different fields, and I can tell you right now that women cannot, in a lot of cases, outdo men when it comes to thinking on their feet, common sense, getting the job done. I'm sorry, I have to differ. I'm maybe too old for this kind of, but if you want to believe that, that's okay. But in the real world, and this is even convinces me even more that there's not going to be any real war, because we've got too many women in charge in the military. If there was a real war coming, that would not be the case. Thank you for taking my call.
I would agree with you in terms of the Army, where physical strength is required to carry guns and ammunition. But in the mechanized forces like the Air Force and the Navy, that really isn't a factor. And as a matter of fact, I have a female relative who's currently on the command track in the United States Navy. And I have every confidence when she gets command of a ship, she's going to do a good job, because she works at it really, really hard. She's certainly going to do a better job than those male commanders over there at the USS Fitzgerald and the John S. McCain. Okay? So thank you for the phone call, Charlie. That's going to be our last phone call here. I got a couple things I want to get in before the closing bell here. The House has now voted through their version of the bill to end the shutdown. It's on its way to Trump's desk. He's expected to sign it immediately. And gosh darn it, we're going to have the government back in business as of tomorrow morning. I got an email from somebody that actually worked for a company that makes navigation systems, and they're saying the reason the car companies are collecting all this data is to make the navigation maps more accurate. because it'll say the speed limit on this road is 60, but everybody's actually driving 30, so it's got to be a rough road. Will bias the route calculation software to a different route. That actually makes a lot of sense to me. That makes a lot of sense to me right there. And by the way, I must have kicked off the car culture. A lot of emails about cars and where to go. Somebody posted the video of Jeremy Clarkson in the Ariel Atom to see, and it looks like a fun car. Not practical, but it's a lot of fun. Okay, there's the beginning of our music here. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Meanwhile, take what you learn here, especially about the FISA warrant, get it in front of everybody. We literally have to force this into the corporate media or it will be disappeared. Okay, so we'll talk to you tomorrow. I'm going to try and fix some of these video issues, and aloha America.